It's my pleasure today to talk to Kimberly Bartosik, who is a choreographer, educator, writer. She has plenty of activities. She's very active and her work actually is very much appreciated within the community. So I think Kimberly I'm very happy to talk to you today. And maybe of course, we will talk about mirror through the mirror of their eyes. But at the beginning, because for those who will read your CV, they will see that there are 9 years of experience to dance with Merce Cunningham Company. And as we had the chance to see his piece in Bratislava in the festival, so maybe my first question would be like, what did this 9 years of dance career brought to you, and how, and as we know, you also got the Bessie for artistry in this work with Cunningham. So what was this experience like for you?
Well, first of all, thank you. And that's a very big question. I'll try to be succinct in answering it. Whenever I reflect back on the place of my history in my choreographic work, there's always a huge amount of tension. And I feel like I have spent quite a bit of time both figuring out how to embrace parts of my history and also fully reject and reframe. And I think it's the reframing that I'm in that phase right now. I don't feel so much in the rejection phase, but right now I feel like I'm reframing a lot of the information that I absorbed from working with Merce, and also from more recently, or only recently in the past few years, teaching the technique. When I left the Cunningham Company many, many decades ago, I stopped. I did a cold stop, and I never taught. I never took class. I didn't do any of the, I didn't allow any of the material to pass through my body. And then there was a point in my own practice where I recognized that I felt like I had enough of a grip on my own body and what my body was producing, that I could sort of let that history come back in a safe way. And that's been very exciting, actually, because there's sort of like a distancing, but then an embrace of the things that were really meaningful to me. But it's super interesting because when people see my work and then they learn that I danced for Merce, they're very shocked because they don't see it in the work. People who know that I danced for Merce are able to see mostly just like the extremes of my work and the rigor of it, but because there's so many layers of emotion that are physical, like they come through the physical process of doing, which is for me very much how I experienced Merce's work. It was very emotional for me, actually, because I took my body to these extreme places. So I've really taken that and put it at the forefront of my own practice. So people who sort of knew me as a dancer with Merce can understand that connection. But people who don't know Merce's work so well, or have only seen it a little bit and think of it as maybe more purely formal or mechanical, they have a much harder time making those connections. But my own, I go through phases. I'm like, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. But it's been, there's been sort of a renewed sort of love affair with the technique itself during COVID, because it became like Cunningham technique is something you can do in a 6x6 square and you get a lot out of it. And so I ended up sort of understanding how that technique can function in so many different places in history. And I started to sign on with the Merce Cunningham Trust to teach Instagram live classes, which has been super stressful because it's just you and your phone and you don't see anybody. But I love doing it because we reach people all over the world. And we get messages all the time from people saying, like, you're getting me through this really difficult time, or I didn't practice Cunningham for a long time, now I'm finding my way back, or I've never done this technique and I'm really interested in it. So it's been this sort of beautiful, like, renovation of what about that work feels perpetually relevant and perpetually part of our present moment. And I think it's the doing of it, really the doing of it, and the philosophy of you don't know it until you do it, and you don't
Yeah.
understand it until you do it. Um,
Yeah, you know, this just this note to this teaching, uh, for me somehow, I mean, I found the way how I can see. I didn't. I mean, I don't have. There was like 7 students in my class, so it was somehow possible to check it. But sometimes these companies, like Lemon Dance Company, or maybe you, when you just teach and you just, I mean, you present some material and you give some task and you do stuff, it's so weird because you just don't have this natural feedback from what you are doing, you know. It's just like, I mean, I just realized like this is the dance teaching is really about this common experience, and this it's visual, it's everything. You just need to be there, and it's very difficult to teach online. Actually, I hope we'll not be pushed to do it one more time this year. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
agreed.
So maybe if other question would be like, as you say, like there is something you are trying to reframe or going back, and it's very personal, but maybe would be interesting to know like what's important for you in the process of creation. Like what do you what is essential when you create a choreography for you?
Um, I think the thing that I look for as I'm starting a project and as I'm starting to wait to see what it's going to be, because there's usually a process of waiting for me. I'm a pretty idea based artist, so I have a lot of ideas. I don't have a lot of movement. I'm not really a movement maker. So I've become a little bit more of a director, I think, where the body is the tool. So I'm very careful about the people I work with because I need to ask certain things of them and trust that what they give back is going to be useful for me. And Through the Mirror of Their Eyes was an extreme example of that. I actually didn't provide a single bit of movement for that piece. It was all physical ideas, and there's a place that I need an artist to get to, which goes back to what I said before about the emotion of the body, of the physical body. It's not that the body is presenting an emotion or the person is presenting an emotion. It's not even that you're feeling an emotion. It's more just the depth of the physicalization, and then that sort of psychic pathways through that physicalization, all the things you have to ask of yourself in order to do something that's quite extreme, reveal something about a person. And then that for me is the material.
Mhm.
What I see is the material. And then there's a process of then pushing the person aside, because it's really not about them. It's really not about Joanna and Dylan and Burr. It's really about what Joanna and Dylan and Burr allow us to see of ourselves through their bodies. So I always think of the body of the performer as this vessel that sort of needs to be cleared out. And it takes a huge amount of humility and power. It's like you have to really know how to do that, because it's not an indulgent process. It's not about I feel so many things and I'm going to go through this process. It's much more about, it's not about me. It's about something deeper than me. And how can I make myself available so that the person who's watching me can feel themselves through me? So it's not about a negation of the self, but like a very particular, very deep connection between the performer and their experience, and then the audience members. It's very, very specific thread, because I don't make work. I never have wanted to make work where the audience can just sit back and watch. But there's something about your body as a witness needs to be feeling many things. And as long as people are feeling many things, I don't care if they're all bad or if they're all good, or if it's usually a mix, of discomfort and joy and sadness and all these different things. As long as there's that flow of many things, many emotions, then I feel like I'm doing what I want to do with my work. If there's not that flow, then it becomes something that people can just sort of distance themselves from and watch. And because I don't really think of myself as a full-on choreographer with lots of movement and structure and everything. The essence of the work is that exchange. It's really that exchange. And I think that we had Through the Mirror of Their Eyes emerged from a piece called I Hunger for You, where I was starting to get to those ideas. And then I feel like I realized them in Through the Mirror of Their Eyes, partly due to what we had processed in I Hunger for You, and partly due to the extreme sophistication and maturity and humility of the people that I work with. So it's that exchange that is just so important to me. And movement is really merely, it's just a way to get there.
Yeah.
It's just a way to get there.
Yeah. And as my personal experiences from watching the piece, which was still like not finally ready, so in the studio, but I think it has really this capacity, I can say it's really, and what really somehow came out for me from that is this very clear, simple, like this idea is just coming to you very straightforward, very simple, very straightforward. So somehow, and as you said, like they were different sensation during the piece, it's just like blah 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 blah, and then suddenly it went out, and it was very interesting, very very nice feeling, like okay. Yeah, so maybe this interview people will watch before or after the show, so maybe we don't say everything, but we know that we know that the piece is also engaging the young performers and children. And is it the first time you use children in your work, or is already any experience with working with them for you?
Oh, this has been this really transformative new thread in my work that started in I Hunger for You, completely without having that being a plan for myself. It was, I was making, I Hunger for You was a very long process. And there was a point where we were in France on residency. We'd been working and working and working and working. And I was watching the piece and I said, there's something missing. I need a young person, which is radical. I don't even teach young people. I was just like, what? And so I literally called up my own child, who was already en route to France with her dad, not to perform. And I said, I think you're in my work. And she was like, what? I said, no, I think I need you. And she had done a few months prior a project with Jerome Bell called Gala, and a project with Thierry, and I always mispronounce his last name, so excuse me for this, Nguyen, who's a French Vietnamese choreographer. And so she was at that point figuring something out about herself and performance. And she's been a kid that's always come with me places and sat on the side while I rehearsed. And I remember her saying to me, now I'm figuring out what this is for me, but she's not a dancer, but she's like a presence. So I remember thinking, oh, I think it's her, but I didn't know what that meant. And what was so fascinating about that moment in my own artistic journey was I had a significant amount of support around that project, more than I had ever had. And that support gave me a certain kind of confidence. And so I thought, I can follow this instinct. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can tell that there's something that I need to trust that impulse. And so she arrived in France, and I said, I will pay you 2 gelatos a day if you rehearse with us. That was her payment.
That was the
And it
deal.
was a deal. But the child is just so deep and so profound. And I had no idea how much she had absorbed all those years of just sitting on the side. And she was never a verbal child. So I gave her this one prompt, and she walked on into the space, and it was just like, it was profound. And we were all very emotional about it, because we're like, whoa, what is this thing that's happening with this work? And her part was very small. It was 2 entrances, one where she just came on and watched, really was a witness. And she emerged from the audience. Nobody knew who this, people thought like it was a young kid who missed their, like, who needed to go to the bathroom or something, and like ended up on stage. They didn't know that it was my child, but that she was a performer. And then another part where she, in very low light, she circles. And at that point she had long hair. And there was this deep image that just, it was very emotional, of just this force, this power in this young person. And it was a girl. And there's a lot of politics happening in our world at that time. It was like deep in the Trump era. People were feeling many challenging things, and there was something about hope and potential and feeling ourselves through her. And everybody remembered that part, the part where she ran. They might have forgotten everything else about the piece, but they all remembered that. And I sat with that after the piece, and I was like, that was profound. And I have to understand what that was. What did she communicate? How was she a filter through which we experienced ourselves? And that spurred the introduction of 3 young people for Through the Mirror of Their Eyes, who have a much, as you saw, much more expansive role in that exchange.
Yeah.
But this was not the plan. This was not the plan at all.
Great. And as it was like in 2018, so now it's
Yes.
2021. Of course, in between there were not so many possibilities to perform it somewhere, but how the piece has developed since it was created in 2018.
Through the Mirror of Their Eyes, or I Hunger for You?
No,
Through the Mirror of
Through
Their
the
Eyes.
Mirror, yeah.
So that wasn't created until we started it in early 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then we presented the version that you saw in that was January of 2020, actually. And then it premiered in March of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the last performance. Our last performance was March 7th at New York Live Arts. And it was the last live performance that many people saw. And then the city shut down about 4 days later.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not actually, we start rehearsing the piece later this month.
Mm-hmm.
We have not done it. All of our tours for the piece were postponed. And we've been talking about a couple things. One, the insane luck that we had that we got the piece out into the world, because at that time it needed to happen then. It was like a piece, it had like all this energy, it had these young people, and it was like so raw. And a lot of my work needs to be that raw. It can't be super polished. So I was like, it has to happen now. And the artist who was just after me at Nyla loaded in and then got canceled. So if we had 4 days difference, the piece wouldn't have happened. So now we understand what the piece is as a fulfilled thing, with the production values and the audience participation, which I'll leave as a surprise. All those things, which we didn't know. It was like so thrilling. It was so exciting. And we know that when we go back, it's going to be a different experience. And what I feel very privileged, to have the experience of bringing it back with these artists, because these three artists are like, if it were anybody else, I would be maybe a little nervous, like, oh, it's not going to be as good. Actually, with these three artists, Joanna, Burr, and Dylan, I think it will be even deeper. And we've talked about, there's the physicality, the rigor of the physicality, but we're all 18 months older, so there's that. But the physicality, again, is just a container for everything else. So our plan is just get the piece out in like 2 rehearsals, remember what it is, the structure, and then sort of plunge into what is it now? What have we carried in our bodies this year and a half? How can we communicate that to our audiences? How can we welcome that? How can we welcome people to feel that and experience that? And I think there's this amazing potential for reminding ourselves of a sort of complicated kind of hope, which the piece had already. It had a complicated kind of hope. That was my like complex beauty, complex hope. It's not easy. We feel many things, but it's there. And now those ideas have a much different kind of resonance. So I think that we're going to be able to dig that out very quickly, because the artists I work with are hungry for that kind of exchange. And to see what happens with this new world that we're in.
Yeah. So
super exciting.
So we hope to see the hope.
Yes. We hope to feel it.
No, but I think I am really looking forward to it, to see in Bratislava. So is there anything you would like to share with our audiences about the piece and how, and something else to add to what was said?
Just that the audience we can't do this piece. The piece doesn't make sense without an audience. It's too hard for the performers to do it without an audience, and the physical and emotional exchange of breath and sweat and time and sort of existential reflection, this moving at a very fast pace, that exchange is the piece. And so the audience is the piece as well. They really are the piece. And my dream of the piece, when I was making it, I knew that when we were going to tour it, that I always had the idea that we would cast 2 of the young performers in our tour communities. That was always the idea. And as complicated as that is with all that we've been through and we still face with COVID, that is still a core of it. And that exchange, that thread with you is also the piece. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very exciting, very new ground for me also. I've never made a piece with that kind of sort of powerful and fragile connection, but I'm a huge believer in it. I'm just like, it's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen, and we'll feel something.
And we are looking forward to see it and experience it in Bratislava. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for talking to you, and we hope.
Yes. Gotta keep the hope. It's what we have right now.